How did they possibly capitulate when we didn't give them billions of dollars?
Well,
how could that ever happen?
I mean, the left doesn't know what to do with this one. They're freaking out. They do not know how to cover the story.
Oh,
so
you mean
they're basically
they don't want real peace? They don't believe in peace through strength? They want Trump to give $150 billion in our cash?
The resistance doesn't want any part of that, Mr. Hannity. You know that.
Mr. Hannity, we're getting very formal. Miss Ingraham will be taking over the channel from now until perpetuity. I'm retired.
Thank you, Sean.
You know what?
Right.
Good night.
Okay, fine. He always throws things. It's very disconcerting to me. Good evening from Washington. I'm Laura Ingraham, and this is the Ingraham Angle. We begin, of course, with that blockbuster news. President Trump proves the experts wrong again and scores a stunning diplomatic triumph. The president has accepted an invitation to meet with the North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. South Korea's national security advisor made the announcement this evening at the White House. He credited Trump's leadership and the maximum pressure he applied to North Korea for creating this breakthrough. Well, that flies in the face of critics who scorched Trump as he engaged in a blunt war of words with Kim for many months.
Tweets like this essentially pour gasoline on that blaze. President Trump is goading Kim Jong-un to test a nuclear missile.
I do worry about what his boiling point might be in the face of some of these inflammatory tweets and statements that the president makes.
This is just how the snowball effect starts. Wars are very easy to get into, and it gets nasty really quickly.
None of this normal, none of this acceptable. None of this, frankly, stable behavior.
And none of that turned out to be true, Jake. Well, tonight, there's egg on a lot of faces after another stunning Donald Trump breakthrough. Let's discuss this dramatic event with Fox News national security and foreign affairs analyst Waleed Phares, Michael Pillsbury of the Hudson Institute, and Mike Fuchs, a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. All right, Mike Fuchs, let's start with you. I was curious as to see how the left was going to cover this tonight, because they're all on, Stormy Daniels, they're on their, usual policies and stories of resistance. But this really is something. We'll see what ultimately happens. But the Huffington Post homepage has like a mock, Trump and a mock Kim Jong-un, I guess, from the Olympics, two impersonators. That's the best they could do.
Well, look, this is a great step forward. The diplomacy that President Trump has signaled the U.S. is willing to do with North Korea is the right step. This is the direction that many people have been calling on President Trump to take for more than a year now, and I'm happy to see that he has done it.
But he got there because he talked tough. He didn't get there because he played patty cake with Kim Jong-un. He said, you come near this country with a nuclear weapon, we will destroy you. That's basically what he said. And all the people on the left were like, how do you do this? You're going to thermonuclear war. What are you doing? And they were going crazy with that one tweet about I have a nuclear button. They went nuts on that. But maybe that's the madman theory, correct, Michael Pillsbury? I mean, you've been writing about this for decades, and I know you're very skeptical because, like me, you've seen North Korea pull a fast one on like this before. But what do you think so far?
Well, it's time to celebrate a great victory when it happens. And you're quite right, just in the last 2 hours, the mainstream left-wing media has been beside themselves. This really can't be happening, or they don't really know how to explain it. It wasn't purchased. There's no concessions. The American exercises can continue for the next 2 months. The entire set of conventional assumptions about North Korea has gone out the window.
I mean, you see those series of sound bites by the I love calling it the experts. The experts. The experts said. The experts predicted. Here's some headlines. USA Today. Analysis. How Trump's nuclear button tweet could jeopardize his foreign policy. Newsweek. Will Trump and Kim's game of nuclear chicken blow up the world? New Republic. This is not a North Korean crisis. It's a Trump crisis. Waleed, take it away.
Look, the critics have focused on the president's tweets. What they have missed is everything else. They did not see that the task forces were surrounding North Korea. They did not see that we are putting pressure on China, that we are mobilizing Japan and South Korea, that we are winning the game at the United Nations Security Council, even with Russia and China not vetoing a resolution against North Korea. It was well crafted, but they missed the big game.
Michael Fuchs, do you believe that the president will meet Kim Jong-un here in the United States? Will they meet in Seoul? What, if you had to guess right now where they would end up meeting? I mean, this is going to be wild if the meeting actually ends up going forward.
Well, look, I think that is actually the big question right now. Does this meeting actually happen? Some senior officials from the White House have already refused to state when exactly
before
the meeting
May, they
might
said,
actually happen, but Press Secretary Sarah Sanders did not say. She said time to be determined.
Yeah.
And so I think the big question now is, what is the plan? We have done a complete 180 from talk of potential war and military conflict
but
to
that was to
a
get him to the
summit-
table. That
but
was
to a summit meeting.
Yeah.
And so I do think that the real question now is, what is the North Korean game here, and what strategy does the United States have to actually extract real concessions from the North Koreans?
Well, I think we've already extracted some concessions, Michael Pillsbury. I mean, we had Madeleine Albright clinking champagne glasses with Kim Jong-il. We had George W. Bush do his best. We had Barack Obama, John Kerry, shuttle diplomacy. Nothing came of it, except North Korea got farther and farther along with its nuclear program. Russia and China both acting as semi-proxies in North Korea, sending technology, food, supplies, fuel. Most of that, not all of that, was shut down, and President Trump pushed hard against the Chinese. You wrote the book about the 100-year marathon about China. How does China play in here?
I think they're equally surprised as we are that Rocket Man, that's his old name, we probably shouldn't use that anymore.
He was a big Elton John fan, I understand, Kim Jong-un, so he took it as a compliment. He was called Rocket Man.
The Chinese didn't help very much, but they helped a little. So they're going to try and take credit for this as much as they can. I think this whole plan began during the transition. I think it's been well thought out. President Trump, when he was campaigning, did not make North Korea his #1 issue. He did it after the transition. And I must say that according to the press, Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis was very nervous and cautious. Tillerson was always trying to
They were nervous
soften.
Nellies. Trump's like, I got it. Don't worry. I mean, they were very nervous about this whole thing. Waleed, I've got to say, the president made it clear to his advisors that the way we had been going about this for decades wasn't working. And he made it clear to them, the reporting tonight, that we wanted a new path forward. Give me the options. How can we break this old path and pave a new way forward? And at least so far, it seems like there's been some success.
What I understand, Laura, is that the essence of this plan is to let the North Koreans feel that they are completely isolated, that even the Chinese are not going to help them, nor the Russians. As I said, on the Security Council, they were not even able to get any vote for them. But there is a missing point we are not seeing in here, is what the North Koreans and the South Koreans have already spoken about. And the messenger, the National Security Advisor of South Korea, who announced this message, he most likely will brief the administration about what is laying ahead.
And Michael Fuchs, when you look at where we've come from and this North Korean issue, it's been one of the most intractable diplomatic, national security, geopolitical challenges the country's ever had. I said during the campaign, Michael Pillsbury, I know you did too, that North Korea was the biggest problem. It wasn't Iran, it wasn't Iraq or Afghanistan.
It wasn't climate change.
It wasn't climate change. It was North Korea, purely for the fact that they don't know this guy. This guy seems like a cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but he has nuclear weapons. And you destabilize that region, China gets involved again. We're back in a war in the Korean Peninsula, and you know that's not going to end well for anybody. But this is intractable. Trump, I mean, it's madman theory. I mean, if I'm a madman, you don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, maybe it is the madman theory.
Well, look, I think that this, again, is really the big question, and we have to be very clear-eyed about what can be realistically achieved here with North Korea because of decades of really difficult experience with North Korea and getting tried, getting played many times over with the North Koreans. So we need to be very clear-eyed about what can be achieved with diplomacy, which is why I asked the question, what is the Trump administration's strategy now with this
I don't think they're going to
summit?
tell the Center for American Progress what the strategy is, but Michael, Bill, I don't think they'll tell any of us. But Michael, what are the pitfalls here? You've written about this extensively. Yes. Give me some advice for the president and his team going into this situation.
Well, they need to understand what the North Koreans are up to. I think they do. I have a lot of confidence in President Trump's team. But the main thing is the negotiations while they go on, which could be a year or two, will result in a freeze of both nuclear tests and missile tests.
Got to happen.
So now time is on our side.
So get it right.
Yes.
Don't rush it to a conclusion. Get it right. Gentlemen, fantastic panel. You guys all came in at the last minute, and we really, really appreciate it. And by the way, speaking of the People's Republic, we're going to take a look at California's radical transformation from a golden state of unlimited promise to a sanctuary state harboring violent criminals. That's next in The Angle.
Before discussing
The radical takeover of California. That's the focus of tonight's Angle. I still remember the first time I traveled to Southern California. It was the summer of 1984, and Los Angeles was hosting the Olympics. Reagan was president, and Republican George Deukmejian was the state's governor. Now, he was a moderate conservative, a law and order kind of guy. The whole place, to me at least, felt like a Beach Boys song. It was the weather, the people, the lifestyle. It was all, beautiful stuff. But today, the sunshine notwithstanding, California is a very different place. It's now a place where state officials actively thwart federal authorities trying to stop violent criminal offenders. Oakland's mayor, Libby Schaaf, went so
matter. So instead of taking in 1,000, they took in a fraction of that. She said, get out of here. And she's telling that to criminals. And it's certainly something that we're looking at with respect to her individually. What she did is incredible and very dangerous from the standpoint of ICE and Border Patrol. Very dangerous. She really made law enforcement much more dangerous.
Now, for her part, Mayor Schaaf is deflecting that criticism, and she's going straight to the R word.
The Attorney General is trying to distract the American people from a failed immigration system by painting a racist broad brush of our immigrant community as dangerous criminals.
Now, who's mentioning skin color or ethnicity or where people are from? That's just pathetic. Now, California, the way you see this playing out, is almost acting like it's a separate country altogether, not a separate state. Well, I think Attorney General Jeff Sessions was 100% correct yesterday when he labeled state officials radical extremists for perpetuating the lawlessness.
federal law determines immigration policy. State of California is not entitled to block that activity. Somebody needs to stand up and say, no, you've gone too far. You cannot do this.
But California AG Javier Becerra, he shot back, and he argued that the state's sanctuary laws are constitutional, adding, our folks are very busy doing public safety around the state. We don't have to do the immigration work for immigration officials. Oh, excuse me, public safety? Well, that's what we're supposed to believe when your own Oakland mayor warned the illegal aliens ahead of time when she got wind of the ICE raid that was about to happen? Today, the White House released a partial list of the crimes committed by the illegal immigrants that California had set free, despite the lawful requests of immigration authorities. Now, check it out. There's a Guatemalan citizen who was arrested last August for injuring his spouse. Well, the Sonoma County Jail provided ICE with a whopping 24 minutes notice before it released the alien. A few weeks later, the Santa Rosa Police Department in California arrested that same individual as a suspect in the murder of his girlfriend. Another Guatemalan, an alleged gang member, was arrested by the San Francisco police more than 10 times between 2013 and 2017 for charges including rape, domestic battery, second-degree robbery, assault, vehicle theft, and on each occasion, what happened was ICE requested notification of his release so then ICE could take him into custody. Each time, ICE's request was declined by California. And then a citizen of Mexico was arrested by Santa Clara County for drug possession on January 11, 2017. He was later convicted of child cruelty, felony possession or purchase of controlled substances, and, of course, possession of marijuana. He was released from local custody. The list goes on, and we could literally do an entire show just on the myriad ways that California's sanctuary policies have endangered the lives of innocent, law-abiding citizens, and, of course, law enforcement, and, of course, legal immigrants. California AG Becerra and Governor Moonbeam Brown are living in an alternative universe. Now, they deny that they even have sanctuary laws in place. Yet here's what their new statutes stipulate. In violation of federal statutes, local officials cannot tell the feds when illegals in custody are about to be released. And they're banned under this law from transferring criminal immigrants to federal officials. Now, we're talking about undocumented criminals here. And the state of California is also so concerned about the welfare of the illegal immigrants that they imposed a state-run inspection of immigrants detained by the federal government. So basically, they're trying to regulate federal immigration detention. And perhaps most outrageously, one California law now requires private business owners they can't voluntarily cooperate with ICE agents. Now, in fact, they have to notify illegal employees before any workplace inspections take place, or those private business owners face heavy fines. Now, you cannot get more radical and rapidly open borders than that. Though California officials are triggered over the Sessions lawsuit, it may be the beginning of restoring some sanity to the state. Republicans, let's face it, have largely been shut out of California politics now for years. And we are a very long way from the days when Pete Wilson was governor back in the 90s. Permissive liberal social welfare policies and the embrace of illegal immigrants have plunged the state into a spiral of homelessness. It's now at a crisis point declared by San Francisco and Los Angeles. And even Orange County, we reported on this before, is grappling with homeless encampments and the crime and the health issues that come along with them. This is not what the people of California want. How do I know that? Well, a UC Berkeley poll just found that 74% of Californians wanted to end sanctuary cities, including 65% of Hispanics and 73% of Democrats. Now, if that's not a cry for sanity or a cry for help, I do not know what is. Sessions and the Trump administration are throwing the Golden State a lifeline with these sanctuary lawsuits. Because if they're successful, perhaps the good vibrations, political and otherwise, can roll through California once again. And that's the angle. Joining me now for reaction here in Washington is John Torres. He's a former acting ICE director in the George W. Bush administration, and Ali Noorani, executive director of the National Immigration Forum. Okay, guys, this is wild. The lawsuit against California, the mayor of Oakland warning the immigrants of the raids. 800 absconded. Not all of them would have been caught by ICE for sure, but some of them would have been. Ali, I want to start with you on this. Why is this good for California, for a mayor like Libby Schaaf to put out this warning that then allows these criminals to escape?
You know, I think something incredibly unfortunate has happened here, and that the term sanctuary has been politicized by both the left and the right. And at the end of the day, the person that's caught in the middle is the cop in the corner who is trying to do their job. So all those terrible cases that you reported just now around the rapes and the predator on children, those crimes need to be reported. Those individuals need to be.
But California's not doing it. They're releasing them back into the state, and they're not notifying ICE.
So earlier this week, there was a raid by ICE throughout the Central Valley. Half of the people that they detained did not have criminal convictions. But when they come and knock on a door, who do they represent themselves as? Police. So what that means is that ICE is wasting valuable law enforcement resources. They should be going after public safety threats. Absolutely. But what they're doing is bringing along everybody else in their household who may be undocumented.
Well, I see your point about that. But, John, I think what's happened, though, is that California has set up this scenario. I mean, clearly the Trump administration is not going door to door. Oh, we're going to take mommy and her kids back to Mexico or wherever. They're focusing on these criminals, but in the midst of where they find them, because they're not being turned over expeditiously by the state, they have ancillary people that they find, that they pick up, that they come in contact with, who are illegally in the United States. So they are swept up in this precisely because we have these policies, whatever you want to call them, sanctuary or not, which puts down a wall between the local law enforcement and the federal immigration officials. And those statistics that we cited, those cases, those are real people, and those are real victims.
Right. So the unintended consequences of these policies are that you have an ICE agent, you have ICE in general, will target criminals. And the easiest way to arrest them is to have them transferred in a custodial setting from a jail or prison directly into ICE custody. But when that doesn't happen and they're released out onto the street, ICE then has to expend more resources, send more agents into the neighborhoods, into the houses, maybe their businesses, and then look for that person that they are targeting. And unlike in the past, they will arrest everyone they encounter.
Well, and Ali, when Mayor Schaaf goes to race, again, it's such a weak argument. This is about illegal immigrants. I don't care if you're from Afghanistan or you're from Mexico or you're from a European country. It is about people in this country illegally. They do not have a universal right to be in this country illegally. Many of them committed crimes, the ones they're targeting. And yet she comes out and says, oh, this is a race thing. You're trying to deflect it from racism. I think people are sick of it. And that poll that shows Democrats and Hispanics want an end to these sanctuary policies, that's a Berkeley poll. That's no, Daily Call or Fox News poll. That is a Berkeley poll.
So I do not think this is about race as much as it is about public safety and the safety of the public. And that's why we think that, I say I don't want to live in a sanctuary city. I want to live in a safe city. And a safe city is where every cop on the corner can be trusted by everybody in their community. And the only way that happens is if that cop on the corner is not seen as federal law enforcement. And that's why cops and employers in California are stuck in such a terrible place.
Well, it's because of the liberal politicians in California.
It's actually because Congress has completely failed to fix this problem.
Okay, well, states can do a lot, too. It's not like just because Congress hasn't done anything, it doesn't mean the states' hands are tied. They're actually coming into contact with these criminals. And what at least two of three of the Immigration Border Protection officials have filed declarations, John, saying that in the lawsuit that was filed yesterday, that California's laws had already negatively affected their work, trying to do their work on the street to keep these communities safe. They can't get any traction. I mean, you were acting head of ICE, and you know how hard this job is. It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
Sure, it's an officer safety issue, it's a public safety issue, and it's also a law enforcement coordination issue. As a young trainee agent, it's drilled in your head. You've got to cooperate and notify local law enforcement so you don't end up with a blue-on-blue situation and shoot an officer who's in plain clothes. And what you have now is a mayor notifying the community that there's an operation taking place that quite possibly some of these people, they may run, number one, but number two, they could be lying in wait. We've seen problems with ambushes over the last couple of years with police officers.
In Dallas, yeah.
We don't want to set that up. We don't want that to create that situation.
Some of the crimes committed by the illegals caught up in these raids. Here's a list. Aggravated assault, involuntary manslaughter, hit and run. I think we have the graphic. Lewd acts with a minor, burglary, DUI, domestic violence, drug trafficking, battery, sex offenses, false imprisonment, negligent discharge of a firearm. Those are the types of people they're looking at. And again, for the life of me, I do not understand why these laws are good for the state of California. It's just mind-boggling to me. And that's why these polls show that the regular people, the people whose lives are endangered, are the ones who are most against these policies. Now, a private employer, for instance, private business owner, is prohibited by state law from basically reporting someone to the feds, or that's crazy.
No, but you're wrong there, Laura. What the state law requires an employer to do is to notify them their workforce that ICE is going to be doing a review. So what's happening here is that that employer is turning into an enforcement agent when all that employer wants to do is grow their business and make sure that they and their family are going to succeed.
But
So why are we asking an employer to take on immigration enforcement?
But why are you telling an employer that he or she cannot be silent when they know there's a raid coming? They have to tell people in their workforce, many of them illegal, undoubtedly, otherwise they wouldn't care about it.
But you said they were complying with ICE's request.
No. The California law, the most problematic, which will get struck down, it's totally unconstitutional, that you cannot cooperate with ICE if you're a private employer.
And during my time at ICE, there were a number of employers that wanted to cooperate, but wanted to do best practices. And so they would reach out to us.
All right, guys, great segment. Are we turning, by the way, our kids into potential killers by letting them watch some gory films and play violent video games? That's controversial. You want to stick around for that debate. Ben Shapiro up next. Hosted a meeting with video game makers and their critics at the White House today. He was busy. They're looking for ways to reduce youth violence following the Florida school shooting. And the president recently expressed shock at what young people are exposed to today.
The video games, the movies, the internet stuff is so violent. It's so incredible. I see it. I get to see things that you'd be amazed at. I have a very young son who I look at some of the things he's watching and I say, how is that possible? And this is what kids are watching.
Now let's discuss whether there is any link between violence on the screen and real violence with Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of the Daily Wire, and retired Army Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman, who's authored books on the psychology of violence, Army Ranger, black belt, and everything. Okay, you win just on that score. It's great to have you both on. Let's start with you, David, because some of these games are really wild. I mean, they're pretty graphic, pretty gory. You know them, Call of Duty. I don't do any of these, but
like Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, they're simulated violence.
It's a criminal simulator, a murder simulator.
Yeah, Evan Ramsey, others like some of these other killers, Dylan Klebold, Eric Harris of Columbine, were steeped in these games. Adam Lanza.
The Norway killer trained on those. He said he trained on them. 69 dead on island in Norway, and he spent a year training on video games to prepare himself for his crime. The killer in Florida, he spent 15 hours a day on violent video games. The most all-consuming, all-pervasive thing in this guy's life are these violent video games. And less than a year ago, the American Psychological Association made a definitive statement. There is a clear, unequivocal link between violent video games, violent behavior. Their blood pressure goes up, their heart rate goes up, violent actions go up. The data is persistent and clear across many different forms. You cannot deny it. It is overwhelming.
Ben Shapiro, I know you're skeptical about a link from video games. Yes. Millions and millions of people play these video games. I mean, girls aren't as into these video games, I'm sorry, as boys are, but I think if my sons had access to them, I'm sure they'd play them all the time, because something about the boy's brain and these games. But why are you not worried about it?
Well, I mean, I'm not supremely worried. I think they're immoral, frankly, but that should really be up to parents. I'm not sure the government should be in the business of stepping in. In 2011, Justice Scalia, in a majority decision 5-4, found that it was actually unconstitutional for the state of California to regulate the capacity of parents to be able to get these video games for their kids, or even for kids to get them themselves without parental permission. He saw that as a content violation under the First Amendment.
Let's talk more about this. The assassinations that take place in the games.
You know, my book, Laura, Assassination Generation, we outlined the dissenting opinions in that case. There's much more to this situation that we need to understand. You know, Clarence Thomas and Stephen Breyer, the most liberal, most conservative justice, dissented. Stephen Breyer said they use these to train military. I'm not a medical expert, but I know who is, and it's not the people the video game industry put out. You need to know more about that case. The data is so overwhelming. And when I was a kid, nobody buckled their seatbelt. We're all just fine. Not everybody with their seatbelt unbuckled died, but all the ones that died had their seatbelt.
So you're saying kids who have predispositions to this, maybe they have a trigger inside of them. They steep themselves in this violence.
To it. A great book, Inside the Mind of a Teen Killer. The new factor in every single case, the new factor. The fact that violent crime is down is not true.
Are they using these in Army Ranger training? Do they do video simulation now?
But we do it with law enforcement and military training. We use simulators. You don't see them in Ranger School. but you see it as an integral part of our training. To make killing a conditioned response is part of modern training. We've got to do it. Healthy people have to be trained to kill, and the video games do the same thing to the kids.
And Ben, what I always think about this is, science or not, for young children to continually see images of heads exploding, chests opening up, you talked about the immorality of all of this. Whether it's constitutional or not constitutional, maybe as a society we have to talk about what numbing ourselves to this very graphic violence. It's not like cartoon. This looks like a real person's head exploding. And it's over and over and over again. And you're doing it 10 hours a day, and you're playing with people in other countries. That's where you're getting your stimulation. And boys need to be outside playing. They need to be doing physical stuff. Instead, they're sitting there on these screens all day. I just don't see how any of that's good.
I fully agree with all of that. I just think there's a question of parental authority, and I think it's a question of how we as a society choose to raise our kids, not necessarily a question of governmental regulation. And the problem I have with the president getting involved is whether this is going to be a cultural issue or is this a regulatory issue? Is this an issue where the president tries to promulgate some sort of legislative response, or where we're supposed to think that the government is going to step in and fix all of this? Because, again, I'm not sure that the statistics match up in terms of just public policy, but I think we're all in agreement that we'd all prefer that kids play less of this, and we have a pretty robust rating system on video games as well. I hope it gets more robust, and I hope more parents take responsibility for the crap their kids are putting in their system.
You know, the Adam Lanza, who had such an empty look in his face, he obviously had severe mental problems as well.
We have laws protecting our kids from guns and tobacco and alcohol and pornography, sex, automobiles, firearms, and all those other areas. They wouldn't buckle their baby in their car seat if it wasn't the law. It's not to get done until we take action. Most major nations on the planet regulate children's access to these games. We're about the only major nation that doesn't do that.
Well, I'm glad I don't like these games. So it's great to have both of you on. And the so-called experts, speaking of experts, were wrong on Trump's approach to North Korea. And they just as might as well have been wrong to criticize his tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Up next, we're going to ask a blue-collar worker who just may know more than the experts. Coming up. President Trump signed an executive order today slapping tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The tariffs apply to all countries except Mexico and Canada while they renegotiate NAFTA with us. The White House says the U.S. now imports 4 times as much steel as it exports.
The American steel and aluminum industry has been ravaged by aggressive foreign trade practices. It's really an assault on our country. It's been an assault. They know better than anybody. It's a process called dumping. It drove our plants out of business. It drove our factories out of business.
Dusty Stevens attended the signing ceremony in the Roosevelt Room today. He's a superintendent at Century Aluminum Potline, and he joins us to discuss what this move is going to mean to his company. I think it's important, by the way, to talk to people who are really in the business instead of pundits and analysts. You're actually in the field, so you know what the heck is going on. First of all, it was great to see that event today at the Roosevelt Room, and you got up and spoke. The president singled out Century Aluminum because of the military-grade materials that you guys produce. What does this policy mean for your Kentucky operations?
So right now we're running at 40% capacity. 2 years ago we had to shut down 60% of our capacity due to the downturn in the market. With the tariffs put in place today, we're going to get back that 60%. We're going to invest over $100 million to get back that military-grade aluminum.
So $100 million will mean how many jobs?
It'll be over 300 jobs.
How important is that to this Kentucky community?
It's huge. It's huge. We keep talking about the 300 jobs that we're going to introduce into the community, and that's great. The biggest issue here is we're going to preserve that plant. We have 200 plus employees here right now. Without this tariffs, we would lose them jobs as well. So in reality, we're saving over 500 jobs.
When you hear people talking about this from Washington or New York, who most of them have never been in a manufacturing plant, they've never stepped foot in one. They don't know people like you. They don't know people like your family, the community. Oh, these jobs, they're never coming back. These jobs, it's time to move on to a 21st century economy. The manufacturing is overrated. It's all robots. What do you say to that?
Wish they could walk in my shoes. I've seen a lot in the last 2 years. I've seen my friends go out the door not knowing if they're going to have a job the next day. I've seen my family's been directly affected by it. My father worked at that smelter for 40 years. He retired early so another guy could keep his job. My brother, he was laid off during the downturn. He didn't come back to work. So this has directly affected our family, not only ours, but there's over 300 other families that were affected by this downturn, and now the Trump administration is giving that back to us.
One of the other gentlemen who was in the Roosevelt room today, I guess we do not have the soundbite, but it was so compelling. He got up, he's from the Union.
Yes.
And he got up and he said, until you see the look of a father looking into the eyes of his son and the sadness of you can't provide for your family. You have 6 kids, as his father and his family had 6 kids. And he said, I'll never forget that day.
You won't.
It was there he is speaking now. You could never forget that day. And he said that emotion, what that does to a family, is just devastating.
And it is. Having to go home and see my brother tore up because he's got a little one at home. He knows he can't provide for her. He knows that he's not going to be able to pay his bills from month to month. And seeing that day in and day out struggle, it's tough.
Did you feel like a politician before Trump came along really understood this community, really got the core of American manufacturing and how important it was to national security and to our economic vitality?
Absolutely not. We've been trying to get something in place for over 2 years. And the Trump administration in the last, 14 some odd months has put this in place and got this ball rolling for us. So this is great, not only for Hallsville, but for the aluminum industry in the U.S.
And the dumping of a glut in aluminum production worldwide from China to other countries has depressed the price. American companies can't compete. But what the critics of these tariffs say is, oh, well, all the products that we make are just going to be a lot more expensive now. You're going to be hurting the mom and pop consumers. To what do you say?
We have a premium product that nobody else in the world can produce. And that is the highest grade aluminum in the world. And it goes to our military and our aerospace. Without that, where do you get that aluminum?
And we're not going to get it from China. We don't want to buy it from China for that.
We don't.
Hey, Dusty, it was great to see you there today, man. And keep doing what you're doing. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you.
You come back anytime, too. I'm coming to your factory, too.
Awesome.
And an apology from Joy Behar to the vice president falls so far short, we're not really even sure it happened. We'll tell you about it next.
Back here.
Comedian Joy Behar is better known for her politics than her humor. As a co-host on The View, Behar's humor, it's hard to locate.
The media is supposed to not report on the fact that 95% of what he says is a lie?
How important is birth control, then, to the Republican Party? They should be out there really applauding Planned Parenthood for supplying birth control, mammograms, and everything else.
And he doesn't want his supporters to believe the media when he's going to be put in handcuffs. That's what I think. Donald Trump directed him to make contact with the Russians. Yeah! He goes to jail, he goes to jail, he goes to jail. Lock him up!
That's hilarious. 3 weeks ago, she sparked a firestorm of criticism for mocking the Christian faith of Vice President Mike Pence.
It's one thing to talk to Jesus. It's another thing when Jesus talks to you.
Exactly.
Okay, well,
That's different.
that's different. That's called mental illness, if I'm not correct.
But
I'm hearing voices.
Well, former GOP presidential candidate Gary Bauer tweeted in response, Dr. Martin Luther King said Christ told him to launch the civil rights movement. Was he insane too, Joy? And after Oprah said that she'd ask God if she should run for president, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council tweeted, so is Joy Behar going to call Oprah mentally ill if she gets an answer? Well, Pence's response was calm and reflective, but as resolute as his faith.
To have ABC maintain a broadcast forum that compared Christianity to mental illness is just wrong.
Well, weeks went by with no apology from either ABC or Behar. But last week, the Angle reported that ABC Disney had been bombarded with more than 30,000 complaints about Behar's comments. For a business dependent on the families, many of them Christians, this seems like the definition of a mental illness, if you ask me. Now, it looks like I was on target because Disney might not always listen to reason, but when money talks, that mouse is all ears. This morning, LA Times reporter Daniel Miller tweeted this. Iger says Joy Behar apologized for the things she said about Christians and the Trump administration. Iger agrees that was appropriate. Well, Iger is the CEO of Disney. It's the parent company of ABC. He reportedly told shareholders that Behar had expressed regret and apologized to Pence personally. But that misses the point.
And it's an insult not to me, but to the vast majority of the American people who, like me, cherish their faith.
Well, Pence is right. Behar doesn't owe an apology to shareholders, but to the millions of Americans of all faiths. Actor James Woods nailed it in a tweet today. He said that Disney had made a corporate apology on behalf of Joy Behar to shareholders in order to protect its stock value. Like, I think we need to hear an apology out of your own mouth, Joy, to make sure that it's coming from you and that we're not just hearing voices. The Last Bite when we return.